Talking all things Kentucky baseball, the Lexington Regional approaches this weekend as the Wildcats begin the road to Omaha. To help us break it down, I'm very pleased to be joined Daniel Hager of Kentucky Sports Radio. He is a baseball beat writer for KSR, does a fantastic job of covering all things Wildcats, and he joins the show. Daniel, what's going on, my man? Appreciate you taking the time.
I'm thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk some ball. Best time of the year.
So, Daniel, before we get into the regional itself, what a year in Lexington for Kentucky baseball, right? Nick Mingione's club. I mean, this was a club I think looked at in the preseason that, let's put it kindly, there were moderate expectations. I don't think anybody saw this coming. The Kentucky Wildcats being co-SEC champions, winning over 20 SEC games. Simply put, Daniel, what clicked? Because, again, you and I were just talking off air. It just seems like Kentucky had to do 10x what some of these other maybe quote-unquote blue blood clubs had to do to get real respect and to be taken seriously. And all of a sudden you looked up and it's like, hey, Kentucky's been in first place for quite a while. They're winning some big series. They're beating the tops of the tops in the SEC. What do you feel like clicked for Kentucky that brought them to this point?
Yeah, so it all started last year, just their second regional under Nick Mingione. I think they were the number 13 overall national seed, but they had to go to play LSU in the super regional, and obviously not surprised that went the way it did, but that was just a really good building block to build off of. And entering the season, UK was unranked and projected to finish fifth in the SEC. And they've really just they started the season just playing okay ball, and then Kennesaw State came to town and kind of just bulldozed them. And we were all like, is this kind of where in past years, the years that UK hasn't made a regional where they've started out even good and then they start playing decent teams and they start kind of going down. But Nick always tells a story when we do our media opportunities. After that Kennesaw State series, they all sat down and kind of talked things out and were like, okay, we're not going to do this. We're going to play different this way. We're going to loosen up a bit. And that's how, if you're familiar with their Get Weird, all the dugout antics that they've been doing just to kind of stay loose. And ever since that Kennesaw State series, they haven't really looked back. They had Georgia come to town right after that. That was before they got super hot towards the end of the year, but dominated them, swept them, and just every other team that came in after them until they hit that little bump in the Tennessee and South Carolina series. Just it's great just seeing how good their offense has been. And like how you and me were saying before, the national media all year was kind of like, okay, they're playing cute, they're getting their bunts and they're doing their antics and they're doing their stealing and their delayed steals, but at some point it's going to fall off. And so they lost their series to Tennessee and Carolina. They're only two SEC series they lost this year. And then they follow it up. They beat Florida, beat Arkansas, beat Vanderbilt, and now they're the number 2 overall seed. So it started last year and it's been building and building. And it's really been incredible to see them get to this spot.
Daniel, what do you feel like the mood of the Kentucky fan base is going into this weekend? Obviously, the Cats didn't have a super long stay in Hoover. What does that really mean? We shall see. But, I think a lot of folks, they don't think of Kentucky Proud Park as being one of the most hostile road environments in the SEC. But, you talk to some folks around that program, and I'm certainly you would echo this. The atmosphere at Kentucky, it's gaining more and more and more respect as the years pass. And Kentucky, I don't want to say it's turning into a baseball school, but I think there's kind of this newfound love of the baseball program. We saw it last year, Daniel, when that place was rocking in those super regionals. What are you expecting in regards to the crowd, and what's the overall excitement level you feel like with the fan base with the upcoming Lexington Regional?
Yeah, so they put tickets on sale this morning. All the reserve seats sold out in 25 minutes. They brought those bleachers in the left field, outfield. Those sold out as well. So there's just general admission now. So that place is already set up to be rocking again. It's just, I'm not sure if it's kind of had to do with kind of maybe a little bit of a decline with Kentucky basketball in the last few years so we're seeing something really succeed. Let's get behind it. And just in the past 2 years, you really see the fan support grow and grow. Because I just think back to last year at the beginning of the season. Like I said, 18, 19, 20, there was no tournament. 21 and 22, UK did not make the NCAA tournament. So at the beginning of last season, you're playing these non-conference games and there's maybe 200 people in attendance. And it just has slowly started building itself to where they play Tennessee this season and they're breaking attendance records all 3 games. And Arkansas, you're breaking attendance records last season with Louisville breaking attendance records. And it just seems like more and more people are getting involved with it. And then it helps when you've got personalities on the team that can kind of transcend just the game of baseball, like a Nick Lopez with the best mustache in baseball, and Mason Moore, hometown guy. It's been a fun crop, and it's been cool to see the community really come around and support them this year.
Daniel, let's zero in on the Lexington Regional itself. Again, Kentucky set to begin play this weekend. They'll take on Western Michigan in their first game. The rest of the field, 2-seed Indiana State, 3-seed Illinois, and like I mentioned, 4-seed is Western Michigan. What were your initial thoughts when you saw the draw for Kentucky, the number 2 overall national seed? Did you feel like it was a favorable draw, maybe a more difficult draw? What was your immediate reaction to the field in the Lexington Regional?
Yeah, my immediate reaction was that Kentucky and North Carolina kind of got jobbed a bit as the number 2 overall seed and then the number 4 overall seed. And you're getting Indiana State, who on the last day before the selection show were projected to be national hosts by both Baseball America and D1 Baseball. And they end up as the number 2 national seeds, number 2 seed. And then you got North Carolina, who gets the number 4 national seed, and they end up with LSU, who's the hottest team in college baseball. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really love the draw, but UK should, they're the number 2 national seed for a reason. Co-SEC champions, they shouldn't be afraid of Indiana State, but they're good. Their pitching is really good at Indiana State. Some really good wins this year. I think they beat 5 or 6 tournament teams, so they're nothing to mess with. And then you go Illinois, Big Ten champs, Western Michigan champs of the MAC. So not an awful draw, and I do like UK's matchup with the Corvallis region. Mm-hmm. I think that sets up nicely. So I wasn't too upset at the draw. I just thought maybe Indiana State or UK getting Indiana State was a little but other than that, not too bad. Not too bad.
Yeah, certainly an Indiana State team, Daniel, that may come in with a bad attitude after last year. They earned the right to host, and instead they were the host, but they hosted at Vanderbilt. Granted, they won that regional. This year, they feel like they should have been hosting. They weren't. Now they go to Kentucky. Again, you mentioned Indiana State and Illinois. Just expand further on the challenges you feel like those 2 teams present them. And again, you look at their resumes. These are 2 really good clubs. Illinois out of the Big Ten. You don't think of the Big Ten in good baseball, but, they went 34-19, 20-8 overall. Western Michigan would be a massive upset. So focusing on the 2 and the 3, I'm sure in your deep dive and your early research, what are the things, has anything jumped out to you specifically that you feel like Kentucky's going to have to be ready for?
Yeah, so I've been slowly rolling out these bio blasts. Haven't got to Illinois and Western Michigan yet. I'll probably do that later tonight. But just going over Indiana State, they've got some really good talent. Their pitching numbers are really, really good. 4.61 team ERA, top 25 in the country. Hits per 9, Ks per 9. They're really well-rounded. Brandon Cutts was the Missouri Valley Conference Pitcher of the Year. They had 4 guys on the All-MVC team. A guy like Grant McGill, who won Gold Glove at the catcher position last year. Luis Hernandez, Randall Diaz, just guys with some big power. And, going into the tournament, the biggest struggle for Kentucky has been their pitching and their bullpen and how unreliable that they've been. Out of their 8 guys, I think there's maybe just 3 of them that I would really trust to come in a big spot right now, and a Ryan Hagenau or a Johnny Hummel. That's kind of what I'm worried on the most. I haven't really got to dive into Illinois or Western Michigan yet, which I'll probably do later tonight, tomorrow morning, to get prepared. But Indiana State's pitching does pose a bit of a concern, but this offense has just proven that they've been top 5, if not even better, all season long. So shouldn't worry too much about that.
Daniel, for the Lexington Regional, if we're talking key to the weekend, what's the key to the weekend for you for Kentucky? What do you feel like they need to do? Again, they're the number 2 national seed for a reason. They should be the favorites. There's some challenges in there, though. Indiana State, Illinois, Western Michigan, like we mentioned, especially what Indiana State brings to the table. And, Daniel, we see it every single year. It's baseball. Some of the top seeds go down. But for Kentucky, when you look at this weekend, the Cats will win the Lexington Regional if they do what?
I think if Nick Mingione sets them up pitching wise, on a perfect schedule to kind of even things out, because you've got Trey Poozer, who was a transfer from College of Charleston, who has been their most reliable arm down the stretch. Then you've got Mason Moore, who was amazing in the Lexington Regional last year. But beyond that, that's when you run into more questions. Dominic Nyman was really good at the first half of the SEC's schedule, but the last half he's not been great at all. And then Travis Smith, who was a really high draft prospect, and he's been injured and has had command issues. So that's really going to be – it's just going to be so important to kind of line up the pitching with what they need to do, because if they get in a spot where in one of those early games they blow through some of these arms and they get in a spot where they've got to win or go home, and you're like, uh-oh, we've got this guy, and this guy, it's just they haven't had that many reliable arms down the stretch at all. And then I'll say Ryan Waldschmidt leading off as a table setter. His importance has been extremely key all season long in that position. Just the 2 SEC tournament games that they lost, LSU and South Carolina, he went over at the top of the lineup. And his trickle-down effect just goes all the way down the lineup 1 through 9. Like the game against Arkansas that they won, he hit the 2 home runs. That's 3 RBI. All season long, he's got a top 5 batting average in the SEC, and he's bringing in runs and moving guys up the bases. So his ability to get the ball moving at the top of the lineup is extremely important, along with trying to decide pitching matchups and which Nick talked about yesterday. They'll spend the next 2 days kind of figuring out what they need to do there, getting game plans, but that's going to be extremely important.
Daniel, you mentioned Trey Poozer. You mentioned some other guys, Ryan Waldschmidt as well. Is there an X factor for you, a guy that you feel like for Kentucky to have a successful weekend? There's just a guy or maybe two that you're looking at that need to have a big weekend for the Cats?
Yeah, just last week I wrote a piece on Mitch Daly, the transfer from Texas, third baseman. He's been their 5-hole hitter all season long, and he's a guy that has really flown under the radar as someone who's been really, really good. I think he's hitting around 292. He's sandwiched in that role between Nick Lopez and Ryan Nicholson. So where Nick Lopez is a base hit machine, Ryan Nicholson is a power threat. And Daly does he bonds that bridge kind of there to get maybe Lopez, move him over and get Nicholson up. And so I think his play, along with his defense, which has been stellar this season, will be really important. And then kind of their concerns in right field that they've had all season long with James McCoy, who honestly is one of the best fielders in the SEC, but his bat has been really disappointing down the stretch. I think he's hitting just 210 this season, and it was worse than that earlier. Maybe a Patrick Herrera sighting, who's a guy that can play anywhere on the field. He delivered with that big hit in the Florida series, that double over the head of the left fielder that burned him. And so just kind of figuring out those kinks there will be extremely important X factor wise.
Daniel, we talked about Kentucky Proud Park will be slammed. It's going to be one hell of a weekend to watch baseball in the Bluegrass. Is the mentality simply Omaha or bust for this team? I mean, again, it's been a great year thus far, and I think some that aren't close to the program would say, oh, well, Kentucky baseball, like you mentioned, it's a cute story. They had a successful season no matter what happens. But it feels like the standard and the expectations are changing. So, what's the amount of pressure level you're feeling? And would you say the mentality around Kentucky baseball right now for a program, by the way, that has never been to Omaha, but this feels as much Omaha or bust as I can remember for Kentucky?
Yeah, I mean, this is the best they've ever been set up to be there. I mean, this is only the 4th regional they've ever hosted, their highest seed, and the first time that they'll host a super regional. So I'm not sure if I would say Omaha or bust, since they've simply never made it. But I will say they've never had an opportunity this good to get to Omaha. So they really, I mean, it will be disappointing for everyone here if they're unable to follow through and get there for the first time ever.
Daniel, going to be an electric weekend, like I mentioned, at Kentucky Proud Park. Daniel Hager does a fantastic job for KSR, covering all things Cats baseball. Daniel, let folks know where they can check out your work.
Yeah, you find me on Kentucky Sports Radio, our website, and on Twitter/X at Daniel Hager KSR. And then on our YouTube channel, the Kentucky Sports Radio YouTube channel, we have our own weekly show where we discuss Kentucky baseball, the Bat Cat Beat. And that's where you can find all things related to me.
Daniel, appreciate you taking the time, man. Let's definitely do it again soon.
All right. Appreciate you having me on, man.